The morning after my father's funeral, I sat alone in the only thing he ever left me, an old rusted Ford truck parked in front of our worn-down family cabin in northern Colorado. The air was bitter that day, not just because of the cold, but because everything inside me felt frozen. I had just buried the man I loved and hated in equal measure. He didn't leave me a business or property or even an apology. What he did leave was a truck with a busted radio and a stubborn ignition. Out of habit or maybe grief, I leaned over and popped open the glove compartment. I expected the usual mess crumpled napkins, expired insurance papers, maybe an old flashlight. But what I found was a letter. It was folded neatly, tucked between an oil-stained map and a silver compass. The envelope didn't have my name on it, just 4 words written in bold black ink, for who she becomes. My hands shook as I pulled it out. The paper was yellowed soft from time, like it had been waiting for this moment. I opened it, and that's when everything changed. It wasn't a will, it wasn't a list of instructions or financial details. It was a confession, a final truth from a man who spent his life hiding behind silence and regret. He didn't just walk away from me and my mother, he'd made a choice, one that rippled through generations. And now, through his last words, I was being asked to finish something he couldn't. It wasn't forgiveness he wanted, it was redemption. And suddenly, the compass made sense. It wasn't pointing north, it was pointing toward something buried long ago. Something that would force me to question everything I believed about loyalty, sacrifice, and the cost of loving someone who's already halfway gone. I thought the funeral was closure, but it was only the beginning. My name is Emma Callahan. I used to believe that life had a rhythm to it, a quiet predictability, like the ticking of a second-hand clock in a small-town kitchen. I grew up in Durango, Colorado, a place where everyone knew your name, your business, and the exact year your father walked out. Mom did what she could. She worked double shifts at the diner, kept our 2-bedroom house from collapsing, and smiled through every storm. She never said a bad word about my father. That silence, it was louder than any scream. After high school, I wanted more than small-town gossip and the smell of bacon grease in my clothes. So I moved to Denver, chasing a dream I couldn't quite name. I was 22, fresh out of community college with a certificate in interior design and a heart too soft for the world. That's where I met him, Nathan Prescott. It was late September, the kind of day when the air bites just enough to make you crave warmth. I was standing in line at a tiny coffee shop off 6th Avenue, scrolling through my phone, trying to find listings for affordable apartments that didn't come with peeling paint or a mouse problem. Nathan stood in front of me. Tan jacket, navy scarf, smelled faintly of cedarwood and money. He turned around, smiled, and offered to pay for my drink after I fumbled with my card. "I've got it," he said with a voice that didn't sound like it belonged in Colorado. He was kind, calm, unassuming in a way that made me feel safe, even though everything about him screamed that he came from a different world. We talked for over an hour that day, sitting under a striped patio umbrella, as leaves floated around us like confetti. I didn't know who he was not at first. He told me he worked in property development, that he was helping his family transition out of legacy assets. I didn't even know what that meant. I just liked the way he looked at me, like I was the only person who mattered. Later, I learned the truth. He wasn't just working in real estate. He was heir to the Prescott Group, one of the oldest and most powerful landholding dynasties in Chicago, with development projects scattered from California to the East Coast. But by the time I found out, it was too late. I was already falling for him. Nathan didn't act like someone who grew up in boardrooms and luxury suites. He laughed at my jokes, washed dishes when he stayed over, and once drove 2 hours in a snowstorm just to bring me soup when I was sick. He said he loved the simplicity of my life, the way I made my own furniture out of reclaimed wood, how I kept wildflowers in old mason jars. We moved in together after 6 months, not because it was planned, but because one night he never went home, and for a while we made it work. He'd kiss me on the forehead before leaving for business trips. I'd text him photos of paint swatches and fabric samples during the day. He encouraged me to start my own design business, said I had an eye for spaces that felt like home. He made me believe I could build something from nothing, but deep down, something always felt temporary. Like I was borrowing time from a life I was never meant to live. That feeling grew heavier the day I told him I was pregnant. He froze just for a second, but it was enough. Then he smiled, kissed my forehead, and whispered, "We'll figure it out." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted so badly to believe that he meant it. But then came the introduction. To her, Vivian Prescott, Nathan's mother. She invited us to a casual family brunch in Aspen that felt more like a royal inspection. Their vacation home sat on 5 acres overlooking the mountains. A chef prepared the food. A violinist played in the background. I wore a thrifted dress and boots that were scuffed at the heel. Vivian didn't have to say much. One glance up and down, measured and cool, told me everything. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't call me names. She didn't need to. "I heard you're expecting," she said with a voice as crisp as the wine in her glass. How unconventional. I smiled, held Nathan's hand, but his grip was looser than before. That night he was quiet on the drive home, said he was just tired. But I knew something had shifted. I just didn't know how deep that shift would go, or how fast it would all collapse. Looking back, I wish I'd asked more questions. I wish I had demanded answers. But love, it makes you blind, and sometimes it makes you silent. 3 weeks after the brunch with Vivian, I noticed Nathan had started sleeping with his phone face down. He said he was busy with expansion plans, that the company was about to break ground on a new development outside Chicago. But something was off. He'd stare out the window for long stretches, holding a glass of bourbon he barely touched. He'd leave early for work and come home later than usual. When I touched his shoulder, he flinched like my hand was a weight he could no longer carry. I told myself it was the stress, the transition to fatherhood, the pressure of his family legacy. But deep down, I already knew. One night, I woke up to find him sitting on the floor beside our bed elbows. On his knees, his head buried in his hands. I whispered, "Talk to me, Nathan." He didn't even look at me, just said, "I'm trying. I'm really trying." The next morning, he brought home roses, 12 long-stemmed perfect petals that didn't belong in our tiny apartment. He kissed my belly, said we'd get through this. But his eyes were already saying goodbye. The day the twins were born, he was in the delivery room. He held my hand, cut the cords, cried when he heard them scream. For a moment, I believed the worst had passed. We named them Lily and Jacob, tiny pink perfect. He looked at them like they were the most precious things in the world. He kissed my forehead, whispered, "I'll always protect you." And I wanted so badly to believe that was still true. But 10 days later, he walked through our front door looking like a ghost of himself, and said the words that would unravel everything. I can't do this. At first, I thought he meant the late nights, the crying, the endless feedings. I said, "It's hard right now, but it'll get better, I promise." He shook his head. "No, Emma, I can't stay." I stood there holding Lily, her tiny fist wrapped around my necklace. I looked into Nathan's face, and for the first time I didn't see love. I saw surrender. "What are you saying?" My voice cracked raw and terrified. He took a breath, slow, broken. "My mom was right. This isn't sustainable. We don't belong in the same world." I backed away, clutching Lily against my chest, like she could shield me from what was coming next. "You're leaving. I'm sorry," that's all he said. And then he walked out. No fight, no begging, no second glance. Just the sound of the door closing and the world collapsing. That night I sat in the nursery alone, Jacob asleep in the crib, Lily crying in my arms, and I just rocked back and forth, waiting to wake up from a nightmare that wasn't ending. The days blurred. I stopped answering calls, stopped replying to messages. I couldn't explain it to anyone. How do you tell people that the man who promised forever traded your family for a penthouse and a promotion? My body ached from labor. My heart bled from betrayal. But the hardest part wasn't the leaving. It was the silence that followed. No closure, no explanation. Just absence. I tried to reach him. Texts, emails. I even called his assistant once, who told me Nathan was traveling indefinitely. Translation, he was gone. His name wasn't on the lease. Our apartment was rented in my name. He'd made sure to keep himself legally unbound. I was a single mother now, with twins, and nothing but a broken heart, a baby monitor, and a stack of unpaid bills. I used to think betrayal came with screaming and slammed doors, but Nathan taught me that sometimes betrayal is quiet. It slips in like fog slow suffocating. I sold the ring, pawned it for groceries and diapers. I went days without showering, nights without sleeping. Sometimes when both babies cried at once, I'd curl up in the hallway and cry louder. Not because I was weak, but because I felt invisible, and God, that invisibility hurt more than anything. People saw the stroller, the diaper bag, the spit-up stains, but they didn't see the woman inside, the one mourning a man who was still alive, just no longer hers. I kept asking myself, what did I do wrong? Was it the way I dressed, the life I came from? The fact that I didn't belong in charity galas or black tie fundraisers? But every time I looked at my babies so small, so helpless, I knew the truth. It wasn't me. It was never me. It was his fear, his weakness, his mother's poison dripping sweetly into his ear. Vivian didn't raise a son. She raised an heir. And when it came down to love or legacy, he chose legacy. There's a kind of rage that simmers under grief, a quiet, heavy flame that doesn't roar but burns. I felt it every time I warmed a bottle, every time I folded tiny clothes, every time I looked at my reflection and saw a stranger in the mirror. But the worst part wasn't that he left. It was realizing he was never planning to stay. He just didn't have the guts to say it until after the twins arrived. That cowardice, that silence, it scarred me in ways I couldn't explain. I didn't need revenge. I didn't want him back. I just wanted the strength to become someone he could never break again. So one night, as rain tapped against the windows and both babies slept peacefully beside me, I stood up. I picked up the pieces of myself that Nathan left scattered across our living room floor, and I started to rebuild. The first morning I decided not to cry was colder than usual. The floor beneath my feet was icy. The kitchen smelled like old formula and stale coffee, and Jacob had already soaked through his onesie before the sun even came up. But still, I didn't cry. I tied my hair into a messy bun, reheated yesterday's coffee in the microwave, and opened my laptop like I was clocking in at a job that didn't yet exist. I had 2 mouths to feed, 2 babies depending on me to hold it together. Falling apart was no longer an option. Before my pregnancy, I'd been working part-time at a boutique interior design firm in downtown Denver. It wasn't glamorous. We mostly staged condos for quick resale, but I loved it. I loved turning cold, empty spaces into something warm, lived in, beautiful. But after the twins were born and Nathan left, I reached out to them, hoping to return even part-time. The response was polite. "Unfortunately, we've filled your position. Best of luck, Emma." Best of luck. I had no childcare, no family nearby, no flexible hours. All I had was a dated resume, 2 infants, and a head full of half-finished ideas. Still, I refused to let that stop me. I scrolled job listings during nap times, typed cover letters at 2 a.m., with Jacob asleep on my chest. The rejections came fast and without mercy. "We're looking for someone with more availability. Your experience doesn't align with our current priorities." Or worse, no reply at all. Each unanswered email felt like another reminder that the world didn't make space for women like me, exhausted, emotional, and anchored to responsibility. But I kept going. I made a spreadsheet of every potential freelance gig I could find, contacted local staging companies, even messaged former classmates to ask if they needed design support. No one bit, until one night, out of desperation, I took a photo of the nursery. It wasn't much, just a thrifted rocking chair, a wall mural I painted by hand, and matching cribs I'd restored with leftover paint. But there was something honest about it, something soft and lived in. I posted the photo on Instagram along with a short caption, "Designed with love between feedings and breakdowns. Motherhood isn't perfect, but it can still be beautiful." The next morning, I had 4 new followers. By the end of the week, 12 more. It wasn't viral, it wasn't even popular, but it was something. And then came the message. A woman named Cassidy, another mom, based in Boulder, DM'd me and said, "Hey, I love your aesthetic. Do you ever do commission work? I'm redecorating my daughter's room." I froze. Commission work. Someone wanted to pay me to create something again. I quoted her something laughably low, just to avoid scaring her off. She agreed. I designed mood boards at night while my babies slept on either side of me, sketched on the backs of junk mail. By the end of the month, I had 2 more small projects. A bookshelf refresh, a corner reading nook. The pay wasn't much, but every dollar felt earned. Every compliment felt like a stitch repairing the fabric of who I used to be. Still, I knew I couldn't scale this forever. There weren't enough hours in the day, and the money, well, it barely covered formula and wipes. So one afternoon, while folding laundry, I noticed something. The baby clothes. They were either incredibly expensive or cheaply made and scratchy. I looked down at Lily wearing one of the onesies I had hand-sewn from a stretch of organic cotton gifted by a neighbor. It fit her perfectly. It looked adorable. And most importantly, she seemed comfortable in it. And just like that, the idea sparked. What if I created a line of baby clothes that were stylish, soft, and affordable? I wasn't a fashion designer. I had no background in apparel, but I knew how to make things. I knew fabric, texture, balance, design. That weekend, I borrowed a dusty sewing machine from the woman in 2B Mrs. Elkins, a retired seamstress who smoked menthols and watched old westerns with her cat. She showed me the basics: thread tension, buttonholes, serger tips. I started small: simple onesies, little leggings, ruffled bloomers in soft pastels. I photographed Lily and Jacob in each piece, draped against handmade quilts, smiling through drool and chaos. Then I started posting. I called the brand Tiny Roots. The name came from a quote I'd written in my journal weeks before. They're small now, but they'll grow strong if you nurture them right. The first few posts flopped. No likes, no comments, but I kept going. Every day during naps I sewed. Every night after bottles and lullabies, I uploaded product listings. I reached out to mom blogs. Most ignored me. I offered free samples. One mom ghosted me. Another told me it's cute, but my followers only shop designer. For a second, I nearly quit. I sat in the kitchen at 1 a.m., crying over a spool of thread, whispering, maybe I'm just not enough. But then the next morning something happened. Cassidy, the same mom who hired me for that bedroom redesign, shared a photo of her daughter in one of my handmade rompers. She wrote, supporting moms. Tiny Roots is the real deal. Within 24 hours, I had my first 10 orders. Within a week, I had to open a wait list. I couldn't believe it. People were tagging me, messaging me, thanking me. One mom in Texas sent a photo of her newborn in a soft green onesie I'd made, along with a message that said I cried when I opened the package. It felt like it was made with love, and she was right, it was. Every stitch, every fold, every detail. Because I wasn't just building a business, I was rebuilding me. Tiny Roots wasn't just about baby clothes. It was about starting over when the world tells you you're finished. It was about choosing to rise when someone else decided to leave you behind. Every order gave me purpose. Every 5-star review reminded me I still mattered. And every time I saw Lily and Jacob giggle in matching handmade sets, I knew I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was becoming someone new. Someone stronger. Someone no one could walk away from again. Because I had finally learned, when no one comes to rescue you, you learn how to rescue yourself. The momentum from those first few orders felt electric. For the first time in months, I was waking up with a sense of purpose, not dread. My days were still chaos, feedings, diaper changes, chasing twins who had just learned to crawl, but I had something of my own again, a spark. Tiny Roots wasn't just a name anymore, it was real. I worked from my living room, which doubled as my sewing space, my shipping station, and sometimes, if I could manage it, my nap zone. Fabric rolls lined the wall spools. Of thread rolled under the couch, and Lily once tried to eat a safety pin. I dropped near her playmat. I was exhausted, constantly, but I was building something, and yet... It didn't take long for the shine to fade. After the initial burst of attention, orders began slowing. The engagement on my posts dropped. A few moms sent messages saying they loved the idea, but the price was a bit much for handmade. Some weeks I didn't sell a single piece. Others I'd get a last-minute order and stay up all night, sewing only for the customer to cancel the next day. One woman complained that the color wasn't what she expected and demanded a refund. Another accused me of copying a design from a major brand, one I'd never even heard of. But the worst came quietly. I got an email from a boutique I had pitched to. They said, while your story is admirable, our clientele prefers products from more established labels. Best of luck. It wasn't just a rejection. It was a reminder this world doesn't applaud women starting over. It doesn't reward single mothers juggling bottles and branding. It wants polished, perfect, proven, and I was none of those things. I started questioning everything. Was I naive to think I could run a business out of a 700 square foot apartment with 2 toddlers? Was I foolish to believe people cared about made with love when there were factory-made outfits on Amazon for half the price? The numbers didn't lie. My savings were thinning, my rent was overdue, and one night after getting a final notice from my electric company, I sat in the dark holding Jacob and whispered, maybe this was all a mistake, but the universe has a way of nudging you. Even in your worst moments. That same night, Cassidy, the first mom who ever believed in me, sent a text. You okay? I saw your website's been quiet. I didn't answer right away. My pride didn't want to admit how close I was to giving up. But then I typed 4 words, I think I'm done. Her reply came fast. Absolutely not. Followed by another message. You have something special. You just need help getting people to see it? She wasn't wrong. My photos were grainy, taken with a cracked phone. My website looked like a blog from 2011. I didn't have a logo, just a name in cursive font. I needed to show the world, not just what I made, but why it mattered. So I swallowed my pride and reached out for help. A local photographer named Jules agreed to do a trade baby clothes for a mini photo session. She had a baby girl too and was building her own client base. We met in a park at golden hour. Lily and Jacob wore their softest matching outfits. Jules captured them running barefoot in the grass, reaching for dandelions giggling under the warm light. The photos were magic. She sent me the full gallery a few days later, and I cried real gut-deep sobs as I scrolled through them, because for the first time, I saw it. The love, the intention, the heart. This wasn't just about clothes. This was about moments, about memory, about wrapping a child in comfort and beauty, especially when the world outside feels hard. I rebuilt the entire website, clean layout, new branding, updated bio, that didn't just say single mom sewing baby clothes, but told the truth. Founded by a mother who rebuilt her life, one stitch at a time. Every piece is handmade, rooted in resilience and sewn with purpose. I started a blog alongside it, wrote late at night about juggling motherhood and entrepreneurship, about grief, grit, gratitude. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I talked about the nights I cried on the kitchen floor, about the days I wanted to quit, about the time I fed my kids cereal for dinner 3 nights in a row because I couldn't afford more. And that honesty, it resonated. Moms started messaging me, not just to buy, but to thank me for being real, for saying what they felt but couldn't put into words. Orders began picking up again, this time not because I was selling products, but because I was building connection. One order turned into 2, then 10, then 20. Soon I couldn't keep up. I hired a part-time sewing assistant, Maria, a retired teacher with a quiet laugh and hands steadier than mine. She worked from her kitchen table across town and dropped off finished pieces every Friday in a brown paper bag. Cassidy helped me design a basic marketing strategy. Email campaigns, scheduled posts, even local Mommy and Me meetups where I could showcase my designs. It wasn't glamorous. It was late nights, early mornings, and a lot of coffee I couldn't afford. But it worked. The name Tiny Roots began circulating in parenting forums. A small influencer, Tasha Marie, featured my story in a short reel on Instagram, showing off the romper she bought for her son. The next day, my website crashed from the traffic. I had 400 new followers, 63 new orders, and 2 emails from boutique owners asking if I wholesaled. I remember sitting at my kitchen table that night, Lily and Jacob asleep, in their room staring at the screen in disbelief. And I said out loud, "You did it." Not to brag, not to boast, but to remind myself I did this. Not Nathan, not Vivian, not anyone else who left or doubted me. Me, Emma Callahan. Single mother, small apartment, big dreams, and even bigger willpower. Because the truth is, success doesn't come wrapped in silk. It comes dressed in spit-up sweat and second-hand hope. And sometimes failure isn't a sign to stop. It's a test to see if you'll keep sowing in the dark until the world finally turns on the light. Just when I thought I was finally steady on my feet, managing a growing business, raising 2 toddlers who could now outrun me, and getting through most days without crying in the bathroom, life threw me another curveball. But this time it didn't break me. It expanded me. It started with a letter. I found it buried at the bottom of a dusty box marked Emma, high school, that my mom had handed over during a visit. I was looking for an old photo of my graduation gown to include in a Mother's Day post. I never expected to find something that would unravel a thread I thought had been cut a long time ago. The envelope was thin-yellowed at the edges, addressed in unfamiliar handwriting. But the return address, Las Vegas, Nevada, sent a jolt through my chest. It was from my father, not Nathan, my real father, the one who left when I was 5. The one my mom never spoke about. The one I had convinced myself didn't care enough to stay. I stared at the envelope for hours before I opened it. Inside was a letter dated 7 years ago. He wrote that he'd been clean for over a decade, that he had tried to contact my mom several times, but she never responded, that he didn't blame her, he didn't deserve a second chance, but he hoped someday I might want to know the full story. He left a phone number and an apology. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind raced between fury and curiosity, between the child who felt abandoned and the woman who had rebuilt her life from ash. What did he want now? But more importantly, what did I want? Closure, forgiveness, or just a piece of the puzzle that had been missing from my identity all these years? I didn't call right away. I carried the letter around in my purse like a fragile secret, read it at red lights, reread it during nap time, folded and refolded it until the creases split. Then one afternoon I dialed the number. My hands were shaking. My voice felt foreign. "Hello." His voice was deeper than I remembered, rough around the edges. There was silence when I said my name, and then a quiet sob. He asked if we could meet, said he understood if the answer was no. But something in me, something small and stubborn, said yes. I drove to Nevada with the kids buckled in the back seat and no expectations. He lived in a modest home on the outskirts of town. The yard was neat. A wind chime hung by the porch, tinkling in the desert breeze. When he opened the door, I barely recognized him, but his eyes, they were mine. The same shade of stormy blue with the same flicker of apology behind them. He didn't try to hug me. He didn't say too much. Instead, he led me to the kitchen, poured 2 cups of coffee, and asked if I wanted to hear the truth. And I did. For hours I listened. To stories about addiction, regret, recovery, about sleeping in shelters, about writing letters he never mailed, about the one time he stood outside my elementary school just to see me from a distance. It didn't erase the pain, but it added context to it. He wasn't a monster. He was a broken man who didn't know how to heal, and strangely, that made it easier to breathe. We didn't become instantly close. There were no Hallmark hugs or overnight forgiveness. But we started small, a few calls a month, birthday cards for the twins, a second-hand tricycle he mailed with a note that said, "I hope they like blue." And little by little, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel: peace. That peace carried me through what came next, because just as one door quietly opened, another one slammed hard in my face. It happened suddenly. An email landed in my inbox from a law firm in New York. The subject line, "Trademark Infringement Notice." I clicked it, heart already racing. The message accused me of brand impersonation and aesthetic duplication of a larger baby clothing line called Tiny Buds, which had just launched their new nature-rooted collection. They claimed my brand Tiny Roots was deliberately similar. My heart dropped. I had no idea who they were, but they clearly knew who I was. I spent the next 12 hours spiraling, reading every line of the cease and desist letter, comparing their designs to mine, Googling the founders. They were funded by a major venture capital firm. Their Instagram had 500,000 followers. They had a PR team, a warehouse, and celebrity endorsements. And I had Maria, a sewing machine with a sticky pedal, and a domain name I bought for $12.99. But I also had something they didn't: a story. I posted a long, heartfelt message on Instagram. I explained the situation, not with anger, but with honesty. I told my followers about the letter, the accusation, and the fear that I might lose everything I'd built. I ended it with this: I started Tiny Roots at my kitchen table with 2 babies, no sleep, and a lot of love. I didn't copy anyone. I created what I needed when I had nothing. And I refused to be erased. The response was overwhelming. People reshared the post thousands of times. Influencers who had once ignored me now came forward in solidarity. Moms shared their own stories of being bullied by big brands. Hashtags like #StandWithTinyRoots and Moms Supporting. Moms started trending in my tiny corner of the internet. Then came the email that changed everything. An attorney from a nonprofit legal center for women-owned businesses reached out. They offered to represent me pro bono. The next few months were brutal. I had to dig through emails, sketchbooks, time-stamped photos, anything that could prove I had built Tiny Roots before Tiny Buds ever existed. There were nights I stayed up crying, not because I was scared of losing, but because I couldn't believe I had to fight just to exist. But I didn't back down, and in the end, they withdrew the claim. No apology, no public statement. But also no lawsuit, and that was enough for me. The victory wasn't just legal, it was personal. It was proof that my voice mattered, that my work was valid, that even if the world tried to shrink me, I had every right to take up space. After the dust settled, I took a long walk through the neighborhood with Lily and Jacob. We passed a small bookstore, a quiet park, and a mural that said, "Grow where you're planted." And I realized something. I hadn't just survived betrayal, abandonment, and struggle. I had rooted myself so deeply that even when the storm came, I held fast. This wasn't just the middle of my story anymore. It was the start of something much, much bigger. It started like most ordinary days due quiet chaos. Lily had spilled a bowl of Cheerios across the floor. Jacob was refusing to wear pants. And I was juggling a phone call with my supplier while scrubbing baby formula off the inside of my laptop case. Just another Tuesday in the life of a mompreneur. I had just wrestled the twins into their car seats preparing for a local artisan fair. where I was hosting a pop-up booth for tiny roots when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Normally, I'd ignore it. I didn't have time for spam calls or surveys, but something made me answer. There was a pause on the other end. Then a voice familiar, tired, uncertain. "Emma, it's Nathan." My stomach flipped so hard, I had to steady myself on the edge of the counter. I hadn't heard that voice in over 4 years. Not since the day he walked out of our apartment and vanished without explanation, like a ghost who once held my whole world in his hands. I didn't say anything. He continued softly. I saw you online, the interview, the brand, the kids. You've done something incredible." I didn't respond. My mind was racing, reliving the sleepless nights, the panic attacks, the cold silences he left behind. Nathan cleared his throat like he was struggling to find the right place to land in a conversation he had no right to start. "I know I'm the last person you want to hear from. I know I don't deserve anything, but I was hoping maybe we could talk." Still silent, he added, "I'm in Denver this week. I could meet you anywhere, just to talk. No expectations, please." I took a long breath. Then quietly I said 1 hour, public place, no surprises. We met at a quiet coffee shop just outside the city. I arrived first. My heart was racing, not with excitement, but with tension. Not because I still loved him, but because I didn't know what version of him would walk through the door. And when he did, he looked small, not physically. Nathan was still tall, still well-dressed, still the same chiseled features that once made me melt. But something in him had withered. His eyes were darker sunken, his smile hesitant, like a man who had spent years rehearsing an apology he never got to give. "Emma," he said, almost breathless, as if just saying my name hurt. I nodded. "Nathan." We sat across from each other, a chasm of years' choices and pain between us. He started slowly. "I didn't reach out before because I thought you'd hate me. And I couldn't blame you if you did. I folded my arms. That's not why I haven't hated you." He blinked, confused. I leaned in. Hate takes energy. I didn't have any left to spare. I had newborn's bills, a broken heart, and a life to rebuild. Hating you would have cost me too much. He lowered his head, swallowing hard. "I watched the interview you did with that business show," he said. "You looked happy, confident, like someone I never deserved to be with." "You're right," I said plainly. He winced. "I deserved that." Nathan went quiet, then said something I didn't expect. "I didn't choose to leave because I stopped loving you." I narrowed my eyes. "Then why did you?" He stared at the table, tracing the rim of his coffee cup like it held the answers. "I was scared of losing everything, of disappointing my family, of not being good enough for you or the kids." My mother said. I cut him off. "Stop. Don't give her that much credit. You left. You made that decision. With your own mouth, with your own legs, you walked away." He looked up, ashamed. "I know. I begged you," I said, my voice shaking for the first time. "I begged you to stay. I was holding your children in my arms, Nathan. You left them. You didn't just leave me." Tears welled in his eyes. "I know. I've thought about that day every single one since." "I doubt that." "I have," he whispered. "You don't know how many times I've picked up the phone, then talked myself out of calling. How many nights I've watched old videos of us, the twins as babies. I missed their first steps, their first words. You missed everything I said, not out of cruelty, but truth." Nathan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect to come back into your life. I just I wrote them letters for Lily and Jacob, not to explain, just to tell them what I wish I could have said if I'd stayed. I took the envelope without opening it. We sat in silence, and for the first time I saw Nathan not as the man who left me, but as the man who couldn't carry what I carried, who wasn't built to stay through the hard parts, who chose safety over love. "I don't hate you," I said softly, "but I don't need you either. Not now, not ever." Nathan nodded slowly, almost with relief. "I figured I just needed you to hear it, from me, one last time." He stood up, unsure if he should hug me or shake my hand, or just disappear again. I made it easy for him. I looked him in the eye. "You walked away once. That part's done. There's no do-over. My kids have a life, a full one, and so do I. You're not part of that story anymore. Don't try to rewrite it." He nodded, quietly, respectfully. Then he walked away. No promises, no grand gestures, no begging for second chances. Just like the first time, he left. But this time, I didn't break. I didn't wait for the door to reopen. I didn't wish for a different ending. Because this wasn't his story anymore. It was mine, and I wasn't walking away from it. I was walking straight through it, stronger, wiser, and more whole than I had ever been before. The weeks after seeing Nathan passed in a strange kind of quiet. Not the heavy, suffocating quiet I remembered from the nights after he left me years ago. This was different. It was the calm that follows a storm, the kind that lets you hear your own breath again, the kind that makes space for clarity. I hadn't realized how tightly I'd still been holding on to that one door, waiting for him to knock, waiting maybe deep down for an apology that would stitch up the last hole in my heart, but standing across from him, hearing his voice, seeing the truth in his eyes. I finally understood. I didn't need closure from him to feel complete. I'd already closed the chapter myself, quietly, day by day, stitch by stitch, and now I was free. Tiny Roots was thriving. After surviving the lawsuit, Scare the brand had grown steadily. I'd partnered with a local printing and packaging studio to help with bulk orders. Maria was now full-time. We'd hired 2 more part-time seamstresses, Angela and Brooke, both moms looking for flexible work like I once needed. I'd outgrown my apartment and moved into a modest but beautiful craftsman-style home in the heart of Golden, Colorado. It had a fenced-in backyard, a kitchen island I'd always dreamed of, and a spare room that I turned into a bright, airy design studio. There were still Cheerios in the couch cushions, still tantrums, still late nights and early mornings. But now I had room to breathe, room to live. One morning, just as I was pouring my second cup of coffee, an email popped into my inbox with a subject line that made me drop the mug. Opportunity, National Retail Collaboration, Request for Meeting. It was from a buyer at Sprout Plus Co., one of the largest eco-conscious children's lifestyle brands in the country. They had seen my story, read the blog, followed the social posts, and they wanted to feature Tiny Roots as part of their Mothers Who Build campaign, highlighting women who had created successful brands from scratch. They weren't just offering shelf space in stores. They wanted to collaborate, design a limited edition line. With my name on it, I stared at the screen in disbelief. My hands trembled. I reread the email 3 times before I called Cassidy, who by now was more than just a friend. She was family. When she picked up, I could barely speak. She screamed so loudly into the phone, Lily came running from the other room and asked, "Are we winning something?" "Yes, baby," I whispered. "Mama's winning something." The following months were a whirlwind. I flew to New York for meetings, stayed in a hotel room by myself for the first time since before the twins were born, walked into conference rooms where people looked at me not like I didn't belong, but like they were lucky to have me there. The collaboration launched in the spring. Tiny Roots X Sprout Plus Co. Soft, organic cotton muted earth tones, hand-drawn patterns based on my original sketches. The same ones I'd once scribbled on the backs of electric bills. They sold out in less than 48 hours. The emails poured in, congratulatory notes, mothers sending pictures of their children wearing my designs. One woman wrote, "Your story gave me the courage to leave a toxic marriage and start my own business. I don't just wear your clothes, I carry your courage." That message stayed with me because I realized it had never really been about the clothes. It had always been about the story. About a woman who refused to let abandonment define her. About a mother who built a brand while bottle-feeding twins at midnight. About someone who didn't just survive, but thrived. One evening, after putting Lily and Jacob to bed, I stood at the window, watching the wind dance through the trees. I thought about all the things I had lost. A relationship that I once thought was forever. A sense of safety that shattered the day he left. The version of myself that believed she couldn't make it on her own. But I also thought about everything I'd gained. A home filled with laughter. A career I created with my own hands. A future that belonged entirely to me. I remembered the early days sitting on the floor, babies crying rent overdue, a needle in one hand and fear in the other. And now I stood here as a woman who had been broken and rebuilt herself, who had loved lost and learned that her worth was never tied to someone else's ability to stay, who had walked away from the pain and into her purpose. I didn't need Nathan's approval, didn't need Vivian's validation, didn't need anyone to tell me I had made it, because I could see it plain as day, in my kids' laughter. In the orders coming through my sight, in the mirror when I looked at a woman I once thought had disappeared forever, I was back, not the same, better. More grounded, more present, more me, and more than anything I was proud, not just of the brand I built, or the sales numbers, or the press features, but of the small, quiet victories no one ever sees, the days I didn't give up, the mornings I got out of bed even when grief was sitting on my chest, the nights I chose love over bitterness, peace over rage, movement over fear. That was my real success, and I knew whatever came next, I could handle it. Because I had walked through fire and come out golden. People love a good comeback story. They see the highlight reel: new house, successful brand, smiling kids in matching outfits, and they assume it all just worked out. But what they don't see are the parts that matter most. They don't see the night I fed my babies the last can of soup in the pantry, praying the payment for a custom romper would clear in time to buy diapers the next day. They don't see the countless moments I stared at my reflection, wondering if I was ruining my children by trying to chase something bigger, something uncertain. They don't see how I used to sleep on the floor of their room because the silence of my own bed was too loud. What I've learned, the real lesson, is this: you can be terrified and brave at the same time. You can miss someone and still know they're wrong for you. You can grieve what was and still fight for what could be. For a long time, I thought strength meant never breaking. But now I know strength is what happens after the breaking. It's in the quiet moments, when no one's watching, when no one is clapping, when you get up off the bathroom floor when you answer another rejection email, when you sow through tears and tell your babies we're okay, even when you're not sure yet if that's true. That's the kind of strength that builds something real, something unshakable. I used to think success was about proving people wrong, proving Nathan wrong, Vivian wrong, the employers who turned me down, the boutiques who said not a good fit. But that mindset, it kept me tied to the very people who tried to break me. Success isn't revenge. Success is peace. Success is waking up and knowing I don't need anyone else to define me. It's being able to buy my kids groceries without panic. It's designing a new line because I'm inspired, not desperate. It's falling asleep without a pit of anxiety in my stomach. And most of all, it's being able to sit across from the man who left me at my lowest and not flinch, not rage, not ache. Just breathe. Because I'm no longer holding on to that version of myself who begged to be chosen. I've already chosen me. If you're listening to this and you feel like you're drowning, like nothing's working, like every door is slamming shut, I want you to hear me. You are not too late. You are not too broken. You are not too small. I built a brand out of scrap fabric and desperation. I turned rejection into redirection. I turned motherhood into a map, not a barrier. You don't need perfect circumstances to start. You just need the courage to believe you're worthy of more. And when you fall, and you will, don't let that fall define you. Let it teach you how to rise. Let it sharpen your voice. Let it fuel your fire. And when you stand again, and you will, don't look back for applause. Look in the mirror, because that woman, the one who didn't quit, she's the reason your kids will know what strength looks like. She's the reason your story will mean something. She's the proof that you were never weak, just waiting for the right moment to become unstoppable.